So Toby, thank you for agreeing to join us as a guest on our fireside chat with the gods of TI and the goddesses, I should say, but the gods and goddesses of TI and all things talent intelligence. That the purpose of these series is supposed to be a relaxed half an hour conversation where we find out a little bit more about Toby. Because I think one of the things that happens in this industry is that we see people, and you said this yourself a minute ago, actually on paper they can look quite unapproachable. They work for some massive businesses, Facebook, Amazon, Google, but there's a person behind the paper-based vision that we see, and we'd like to find out more about the person. So thanks for agreeing to talk to me today. Toby, tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so well, thank you for having me. Firstly, I love these sorts of chats, so it's lovely to be here. My background, so I come from a pretty much a traditional recruitment search background. So I started off as raw as you can probably get in the recruitment world. I was doing finance accounting research in a recruitment firm in London. My job, I was handed a massive red book, which was affectionately called the Big Red Book. Slapped that on my desk, and that had a list of everyone that was a qualified or soon to qualify accountant in the UK. And my job was literally to go through the list, A to Z, finding people soon to qualify, and then try and reach out to them and see if they were interested in their job. So it's all around that newly qual, soon to qual accounting market in the UK. Loved it, really enjoyed it. I like the researchy side of things. Pivoted as you would expect from the agency side to become more of a normal consultant, recruiter, etc. In all honesty, didn't like it as much. I preferred that candidate side of things, but back in those days, sourcing as a function really didn't exist. Research was this back office piece that didn't really get involved in any kind of the candidate engagement, but I enjoyed that side too. So I didn't really find a role in the agency side that really grabbed me. And I went to a couple of different agencies and went over to Australia for a bit to do RPO and did some big campaigns of stuff. So hiring squads of prison guards or squads of train guards. It was big squads of stuff, which was great, completely different. You know, you'd fly into a remote location in Australia, recruit an entire call center in the space of 2-3 days, and then fly off and do something else the next week. So really interesting and different stuff. Came back to the UK and got back into that searchy research side of things. Started setting up sourcing teams for companies. So by that point, I got quite good at the whole direct search piece and driving direct search strategies. So got employed to start up sourcing teams for companies. And it was one of those companies where I was running a sourcing team. Things were working. You know, the sourcing team was doing its thing. We had the usual handoff points where difficult, where you hand off from the white glove surface of sourcing to the machine of recruitment, and the candidate piece dropped a bit. But we started to see other factors coming into play, and I think that's probably the point where I started to really get interested in the intel side of stuff. So we started doing what I would now refer to as sourcing intel, where it was that sourcing-based intelligence, but using that to try and influence business and decisions. And obviously we can dig into that more, the whole story around that if you want. But then went from there, got into a bit of an exec search space for a while, but missed the volume of TA. Exec is great. You can do some really good research, really impactful, really high profile. But you can do different things when you're looking at the entire TA organization. When you're looking at things at scale, you can just do intel in a different way, I think. And that's why I went back to Philips or went to Philips and was asked to set up the TI function.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because there are some things in there that for me are the real reason that we do this. So first and foremost, by the way, I should have said thank you very much for sitting by your fire, because that makes this a proper fireside chat. So it's almost as if you've planned it, T. Thanks for doing that. But also, I think, and I can hear the kids a little bit, which is fab. People don't really know about you outside of work, and that's almost as cool as you in work. So tell us a little bit about you outside of work.
Definitely not as cool. So I've got three boys, three young boys, which is why this space looks like this. One of them's just started playing the harmonica, which is fun, and then the dog will start howling in a minute, so that'll be great. So I've got 3 boys, 2 dogs, 2 cats, 17 chickens, something like that. So very busy, and a brilliant wife that handles everything outside of this office, basically. So she's amazing. I used to play a lot of rugby. I was really into sports when I was growing up, so I played a lot of rugby. I'm no great loss to it. I enjoyed it, but growing up, I was this scraggly, tall thing that didn't really ever fill out. Sadly, I probably overcompensate for that nowadays and filled out a bit too much. But once I stopped playing rugby, I started wanting to do stuff. So I started making things, not very good at making anything, but things like I got into a phase of making rings, making trinkets, just making bits and bobs in the shed, primarily as a way that when you're playing with power tools, you kind of have to, it's essentially my version of yoga. When you're playing with power tools, you can't be thinking about other stuff, because otherwise you put your hand through a saw blade or you're drilling through your foot or something. So it kind of forces you to focus on stuff. And that's kind of what I do now. So we homeschool the kids. I work from home, and I have done for the best part of a decade. But then when I'm not looking after the kids and messing around with the pets, I'll be pottering around the shed, making stuff that by and large no one wants, if I'm going to be honest. It's stuff that I just enjoy making. It's not very good, but there are definitely some parallels that come across into my work life as well. So the bit with making stuff is I like the build, I like the make. I have no interest in the finish. I have no interest in that final 20% where you spend your life sanding away and buffing it and sanding and buffing and lacquer and varnish and all that stuff. No interest.
What do you do with it? What do you do with the stuff that you make?
I give most of it away. Okay, some of it I keep. No one even wants it when I make it, so it just goes anywhere. But it can be really odd things. So I've got a ring I'm wearing today that was one I made. I got into making these mini little skateboards for a while for the kids. So making these little bits of wood and stuff. But they just end up knocking around. But it's all around the build bit, and that's the same in my work life. It's the build bit I enjoy. That final 20%, 10% finish that I think people often obsess over.
Yeah.
For me, it's just not worth the return in time. Like that's not adding the value for me. So it is quite interesting kind of when I see the personal life stuff and flip across. And there's a few things that I see from my personal life that flip across into work life and mean I work the way I work.
It's interesting. I'm married to an engineer, as you know, and I have conversations with him all the time where I go, you know what, perfection is the enemy of good enough. It's good enough. Let's just crack on. So I think there are some similarities. But I think if I ran a poll on the Talent Intelligence Collective and said, name one thing about Toby that you didn't think would be true, none of them would say you've got 17 chickens. So isn't it cool that already this is starting to show a little bit more about the faiths behind Toby Culshaw? So thank you for that bit. What do you think's been your greatest achievement or accomplishment today?
Ooh, good question. Do you know what? It's a good question, but I also hate those questions. And the reason being is, and this goes for all kind of retrospective stuff. I don't even know if I told you this, but I have no memory. I don't have a memory. I was born super premature. I was born like 3 months premature. And I wasn't done cooking, basically. I was put on the side. They thought I was dead. I was like 2 pounds and they left me on the side. Anyway, clearly I didn't die. But it's one of the reasons I'm such a small human. I never quite got to the 6'6" I was aiming for. I'm just this tiny person now. But anyway, I don't have a memory.
Tiny at all, and that's extraordinary. And I genuinely didn't know that at all.
Yeah, I was super premature. I was a tiny kid. All going through school, I was really, really small. I didn't grow until I was about 16, and I probably grew a foot in a summer. And I went from about 5'3" to 6'3" in the space for summer. Half the kids in my school didn't know who I was anymore, and they didn't believe I was the same kid. So that's where a lot of the sporting stuff went slightly awry as well, because I just wasn't used to my body anymore. I couldn't do any of the stuff I used to be able to do.
All right. So instead of looking backwards, then, so if you weren't done cooking, you definitely can see the recipe book, right? So if you look back in 10 years from now, what do you want to be recognised for?
So the thing I want to have achieved is to create amazing leaders. So when I want to go to a conference, I don't want people like me on the stage anymore. I'm bored of me on the stage. I'm bored of going to conferences and seeing very, very similar faces. But I want to see the next generation of people coming through, and that's what I want to see from my teams. So when I have a team, I want to grow people within that team so that they want to then go and create amazing teams. And I'm not the sort of person that grows a team, wants to keep it forever. I want it to be so amazing that no one wants to leave, but I don't want to hang on to people at all. So yeah, I guess if I look back in, it would have been I've succeeded in inverted commas. It would be how I got a network of amazing people from the teams I've managed that are now doing amazing things. And I think we've all got a really amazing opportunity at the moment with talent intel side of things to frame an industry. And it's very rare in life you get to frame anything. Like you don't even often get to frame your job, let alone get to frame an entire industry and something that's coming up from nothing. So for me, that's super exciting as well. You know, we're definitely at the infancy, and we can go in lots of different directions, whether it's super transactional, whether it's super strategic, something in between, different directions. And I think that's quite exciting as well, is we're at this stage where we do get to build something that just hasn't really existed before.
How cool. And you know, people listening to this are going to go, there's no way he can actually be that nice, because you're just a nice bloke. And you know, I hope that really comes across from this, because it is true. What does, you know, clearly you've just taken on a new role, or relatively new now. What does the new role entail?
So I've joined Amazon from Philips, so been there for about 8 months now. I look after worldwide ops and consumer. So it's everything from buying stuff on Amazon.com through the logistics, warehousing, so all the robotics, right through to the airliners, right through to getting stuff through to your door. What that doesn't cover is the big volume of roles. So the hourly workers is something separate once again, called workforce staffing. But I handle talent intelligence for everything that world that's left. So lots of opportunity, lots of different types of roles, lots of different types of scale and scope, and lots of fun, to be honest. It's lots of challenges out there, but it's a lot of fun.
And how big's your team now?
It's still small. So we're a team of 6.
Yep.
So it's a small team. I think it could feasibly be much, much bigger, but it's for me, it's about the appropriateness of a size and the appropriateness of a team. I think there's a lot we're doing around reframing the team. Historically, we've done a lot of work for talent acquisition, enabling them to recruit better, recruit faster, etc., and scaling their efforts. Whereas now we're pivoting a bit and trying to say, well, actually, let's level up the work, level up the stakeholder group, and broaden the customer base. So we're moving up in terms of the org and out in terms of the size. So it's a very different model. But yeah, I think that this year is really about reframing, building those new relationships, seeing if there's an appetite for it. You know, in all honesty, it's a bit of an experiment. You know, they haven't really had this sort of work before. So it's a bit of an experiment to see, is there an appetite? Do people want this sort of intel?
And what was the difference, or I guess what was the I'd say key learning, but that sounds a bit kind of mature, but the difference between moving from the team that you'd built at Philips, which arguably was kind of the first of its kind, really, which is kind of what helped to set the stage, to where you are now at Amazon Worldwide Ops and Consumer?
Yeah, I think one of the core things is that the things that make companies amazing can also be some of the challenges. And you know, Amazon's a massive beast. It's a great fun beast to work in. You're empowered to do a lot. You're empowered to make decisions. There's a lot of the decision making is decentralized, so you can just get on and move fast and do things. The flip side of that is there's a lot of decisions being made out in the business. So you have instead of a centralized piece where you can tie into and build a mechanism to really inject the TI in really early stage, and you know, I'm in this mechanism, I've wrapped up all the real estate decisions everywhere. That isn't the case here. You know, you've got lots of decentralized decision making, so you have to look at it in a very different way to say, how do I impact scale decisions in a decentralized organization? With that, you've got duplication because people can build their own version of whatever it is you're doing anywhere. So, any given moment, somebody else could set up another TI team in another part of the org, and there's nothing we could do about that. So it brings an added pressure of you always have to improve, always have to prove value, to prove the value of having your team and working with your team rather than setting up their own team somewhere else. So there's lots of challenges that come with it, but I think that's what also makes it exciting, is that every day I'll find teams that I look at and go, you're doing some really cool stuff, we need to partner up. And they didn't know we existed, we didn't know they existed. And these could be really big teams. You're talking teams that could be 50, 60 people strong, and you just had no idea they exist. And that's super exciting for me.
I love that. So where do great ideas come from?
I think for me, it's everywhere. You need to be really open to ideas and open to new ways of working and challenge. And I think this ties back to the memory piece I mentioned earlier. Because I don't have a long-term memory, I don't think about the past. I don't dwell on the past. I don't really ever think about achievements from the past, because I'm not going to remember them, literally. So I'm always looking at today and the future, because that's the only stuff I can really impact or think about. So for me, I'd say I constantly look for opportunities. And I think in every change, in every decision, there is an opportunity. And it's about almost building a muscle to say, what is the opportunity I'm seeing here? Which is ironic, because I was useless at biz dev when I was in a recruiting agency. I hated biz dev, I was terrible at it. But now I'd say a big chunk of my job is seeing what's changing within the organization and what opportunity is that giving for us. And that could be anything from a strategy change, it could be a leadership change, it could be an organizational change, and anything at all. It's that case of what's different, what's changing, and what does that mean for us? And I think with that, you start flexing into other ideas and looking at other ways of working, whether it's taking stuff from cybersecurity, whether it's taking stuff from marketing analytics, marketing intelligence. It's looking at different things and say, okay, well, I don't know about that. Let's find out about that. And what's the opportunity that's going to give to us?
So how does your day structure then? You get up in the morning, you kind of come to see what's going on. What happens?
So mornings are generally a little quieter, in inverted commas. I don't have as many meetings, it's probably a better way of putting it. I don't have as many meetings. I have lots of catch up from my overnight. Being a mainly US organization, afternoons go crazy with meetings. So as soon as it hits afternoon, my diary is gone into the early evening. And then obviously when I finish the night, the US is still working. So my inbox is always pretty busy to come into each morning. We have, because of the size of the organization, we do have quite a few meetings here. But as I'm sure people are aware, Amazon's meetings aren't the traditional type of meeting. They're very much led by the long form text structure. So you'll have a paper, you're going in, reading the paper, understanding the topic and whatever you're looking at that day, and then you'll have an open discussion about it. And I think from that side, it's quite interesting, because our leadership principles do give a culture where you do challenge decisions, you do challenge papers. It's not turning up for meetings sake. You are expected to participate, you're expected to have an opinion. So yeah, it can be quite a busy day. But I think the one thing I'd say to make sure people carve out is, and this is what I've learned from 10 years remote work, is you can't replicate an office environment remote. It just doesn't work that way. And if you try and do that, you end up with back-to-back meetings with no break, and you'll burn out. So you have to build in the 15 minutes of coffee break, go and stretch your legs for 10 minutes. You have to build that stuff into your diary as well. So yeah, and thinking time, that reflective period of, okay, well, what's going on? Why are we doing this? Why are we in this meeting? Why are we doing this process? How is the team functioning? That whole kind of reflective piece of how am I going to push and develop and grow myself, the team, the function, etc. You've got to build those periods in as well.
So as you're kind of reshaping or rethinking what your team looks like, if you were to then approach another team, whether it's a strategy team, an M&A team, whatever it is, do you have to produce a paper before you set a meeting with them to go, look, this is the concept, this is what I want you to read, so people come to it? Or can it be completely kind of open, just arrive and it's ideas?
Yeah, there's no set rule or anything, so you can do whatever you feel appropriate. Often teams will like a paper for context. So you might send a pre-read, for example, or you might set the meeting and have a pre-read in the beginning of it, or a read in the beginning of it. And that could be kind of an introduction to talent intelligence, etc. But equally, absolutely, you'll have meetings where it's just a very open, look, it's a meet and greet. There's no agenda here. I just want to talk to you about what you do, understand what your world is, tell you that bit about what we do. So yeah, there's no structured rule one way or the other. I think it's just a case of reading the room and seeing what people like. If people, and giving them the option, even if it's a meet and greet, have that one page on the side. So if they want to understand the context a bit more first, they've got it there if they need it.
That's very cool. What surprises you most about your job?
I guess there's two things. One is the innovation and the fact that you can just build stuff that's never existed. You can build whole options of service that no one's ever done it before. And I think that's one of the things I love about Amazon is that freedom to say, oh, we'll try it. Just go and do it. We talk about one-way and two-way doors here, where a one-way door is once that decision's made, once that door is shut, you can't go back. You can't get out of it. And they're really big decisions that you really need to think about. You really need to make sure that's the right decision. Two-way doors, you can be a bit more flexible because you can go through it. If it's not right, just reverse back out, come back out again. And I think within the TI world, a lot of what we do is two-way doors. If we're trying new service offerings, if we're trying new dashboard or tools or processes or systems, whatever it is, it's all pretty much two-way door stuff. You can go and try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. It's fine. So I quite like that whole innovation in terms of the offering side of things. But also I like the intellectual curiosity. I think within this world, you get to think about stuff a lot more. You're not in a transactional delivery mode. You're not churning out hundreds and hundreds of papers. People are coming to you with big problems, and you're being tasked to give consulting advice on those big problems. So it's almost doing a disservice to them if you don't make sure it's robust, if you don't spend the time thinking about it, if you don't make sure that you've got lots of different data points to cross-correlate, if you're not looking at a really holistic strategy that's also tying in with this data and finance data and real estate data and competitive intel or whatever it may be. I think that's really interesting for me. It's that when you look at it and go, we have no idea how to solve that problem. Great, that's exactly what we like. If it's something you've already done 30, 40 times, can you do it? Absolutely. Is it robust? Absolutely. Does it really put that fire into you in the morning? Probably not.
Oh, I love that, because those two things are inextricably linked, aren't they? Without intellectual curiosity, it's hard to find innovation. But then you also have to have, the one way, the two-way doors is just genius. And I like the idea of it being two-way and not revolving, right? Because it does imply you make a decision, but it's okay to undo it, and then you can make a different one, and it's okay to undo it, rather than something being continually evolving as a process, because that just ends up in circles, right?
And it certainly gives you an emotional safety net to know that certain organizations you're in, and you think, if I make any decision that's wrong, it's like a black mark against me for the rest of my career. And here, it's almost like we just don't have time for that. We're just too busy. So that comes with a certain freedom, because you're saying, well, let's just try it. What's the worst that can happen?
I love that. So anyone who's listening to this, kind of when we release it, who's currently working in the Amazon employee brand, needs to take that section and just go bang, because that's who you are, isn't it, as a business, and that's coming from the heart. You've been in the world of talent intelligence for some time now. You're probably one of the most experienced people in terms of years experience, but also in terms of kind of breadth of role that's in the industry. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the industry now?
I think that there's the main one. I think there's lots of stuff. I think there's stuff from a technology side of things, and sort of you get in the taxonomies and all that side of things. I think that will just work itself out. I think you will end up with a standardized taxonomy, and it will probably be the US government or something will come out with their standardized taxonomy and say, well, that's what everyone's going to use, or everyone will just go, we don't need taxonomies, we're going to go straight to skills based, and so we don't really need that defined taxonomy. So I think the tech side of things to one side. I think the biggest thing is, because we're so new, we've got to be clear that we don't end up with a bit of an identity crisis. And what I mean by that is talent intelligence as a function has started to evolve over the last, say, 8 to 10 years. And there are some really amazing people that have been doing great stuff. You know, Microsoft with Annie Chai back in the day started doing some amazing stuff, and he's now over here. Nick's doing some amazing stuff there with the team and Zach. You know, you've got people like Ian Bailey that kicked things off in the early days with Cisco. There's, you know, Hi Haro did some great stuff at Intel. You know, there's some really, really good innovation stuff happening. And talent intelligence as a phrase started coming through probably in the last 5-6 years. And it started to get much more popular, which is great. I think the problem is, though, that not only within the roles and requisitions are we seeing a real blurring of the lines around what it means to be in talent intelligence. I think you're seeing the vendor side really blurring the lines, and talent intelligence meaning anything within the talent spectrum. So it's anything from talent management, acquisition, analytics, etc. So you're seeing people platforms that are now talent intelligence platforms. So we might need a rebranding at some point, because I don't know whether we only deal with talent. You know, we are much broader. It could be that we're actually workforce intelligence and we're misbranded. But equally, it could be that, do you know what, talent intelligence, it is tied to that requisition level. You know, for me as an individual, I don't drive it that way. I don't drive my teams that way. We're not tied into filling jobs and sourcing intel, as I mentioned earlier. But maybe that is where the rest of the market goes. Maybe my teams will always be an outlier. But I think that's the opportunity we're in at the moment is, well, actually, if we're going to set down the flag in the sand or the line in the sand, whatever it is, and say this is what it means to have a TI function, I think we've got to be very clear about what it is we do and what it is we don't do. The example I use quite often is, and this is where the challenges lie, I think, if you're an SVP and you're sitting there and you've got a really big strategic decision to make, and you'd normally get one of the big consulting firms to come in, but you've heard about this amazing internal talent intelligence team that you've got, so you want to use their expertise, you bring them in. You're expecting somebody that's going to be of an ilk of the big consulting firms. So you're expecting a BCG or a McKinsey or a Bain or whatever. That's what you're expecting. Even if the person there is of that caliber and can do that work, if you know that they've also been sourcing on a rec that's 10 levels deep in your organization, it's very hard for you to mentally switch between a transactional sourcing activity 10 layers deep in your organization to seeing them as a trusted strategic advisor. And equally for the individual, I think that's a really hard switch to make, where you're going from, I'm doing this, even if it's proactive pipelining, even if it's talent mapping, however you want to phrase it, if you're doing that requisition level work, to suddenly switching and suddenly having to be a really strategic advisor to senior execs, that's a really hard place to switch your mindset and to change your level setting, often really fast, you know, from one meeting to the next. Yeah. That can be really, really hard. And I think we need to get better and more mature as an industry about how we do that. Can TI teams do both? Yeah, sure, probably, yeah. But you probably want to compartmentalize. You probably want to say, okay, well, how do we have this artificial break to make sure we're setting people up for success with this?
It's interesting. I'm just about to finish writing a paper, which hopefully by the time we've recorded this and kind of taken it out, will kind of tie in. But the title at the moment, before my marketing team get hold of it, is The Rise and Fall of Talent Intelligence and the Emergence of Something New. Because it's exactly that kind of concept of, you know, this is what it was, and now it's something else. And whether that's a fall or not, you know, that's up to the marketing team, right? They'll say it isn't. But yeah, there's a space that's being created, and it links back to you saying it's continually evolving. And there isn't one authority that says this is what it's going to be. It just needs to be something that resonates. It resonates with the people that are going to use the function, rather than resonates with the functions, you know, and suppliers themselves, which I think is cool. And yet there are lots of companies now who are setting up new talent intelligence teams. You know, Activision, you know, we know about. Shopify, we know about. What are you seeing from the kind of specs that are coming out, or what the market is saying about those roles that you think will help to shape the industry? You know, and I don't mean, you know, giving away some crown jewels, but you think will help to shape the industry?
Yeah. So I won't comment upon those roles specifically because that'll be unfair. But the roles generally, what I'm seeing, I think the new functions that are being created are quite fascinating because they're often going quite broad, and I think that's also a difference you're seeing between roles that are created with existing headcount and people being promoted up and saying expand this remit. Within that world, you often see still quite a tight remit. And it's, talent acquisition leads being tasked to set up a research functionality or talent intelligence capability. And quite often they're building things that still tie into their silo. They're still looking at talent acquisition stuff. It's just giving intel to it and up leveling TA. The roles where they're going externally for heads of TI, it's quite often where they're saying, well, actually, we're looking at this much more holistically. And they're tying in people analytics, they're tying in workforce planning, they're tying in talent analytics and talent intelligence. And it's saying we're looking at this really holistically. We need somebody that can wrap our arms around lots of things. And that goes from a functional perspective. So like I mentioned, workforce planning, people analytics, etc., right through to the skills and wanting people that are excellent at stakeholder engagement and internal consulting, but right through to being, great coders and can dive into the detail and everything else. So I think that's, for me, can you find people with everything? I don't know. Is the honest answer. I think it's a heck of an ask. But I think the fact that people are thinking in that way is super exciting. And we often talk about kind of where TI sits as a home. And in the past, I've spoken about the fact I think it could be in a centralized intelligence function. That could still be the case. Within HR, I think you could go into the CHRO or into talent strategy. Absolutely, that could be the case. But I'm also now seeing more flow with, say, workforce planning, where they've been very good at getting internal data sets, forecasting out, planning ahead. But now they're looking externally saying, well, actually, what's the context for all of this? So I'm seeing much more of a relationship and a closer relationship with workforce planning in terms of the programmatic side. I think the project-based stuff we do is still different because it's dealing with one business problem and the next business problem. But the programmatic side, where it's that rolling recurrence, I think that there's a lot of time with workforce planning.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny. So when I was doing this kind of title piece, this emergence of something new for me was, we're seeing and talking to people who I think are kind of leapfrogging what was the build of talent intelligence, and they're going, right, how do we make it strategic right now? Right, if we're going to do this, what do we do and where do we start? And that's really exciting. Right, two more questions because I'm conscious of time. I was only going to be half an hour, but you are fascinating, so it's going to be a bit longer. The first is wave a magic wand, and what does the future of TI look like for you, for Toby, not for TI, but for Toby?
So I think it actually ties into the previous comment, please. I think for me, it's strategically important function. It's a function that's delivering at scale. I think it's that holistic vision is really, really important and understand the context. I think we're definitely going to see that happening rapidly in the next 12 months. And the reason being is if you ask anyone in the C-suite, what's their biggest worry for the future? It's not being able to have access to the appropriate talent. We're seeing some huge changes, obviously, in the talent market at the moment. We're seeing some huge changes around availability of talent and what that means with remote work. Companies that traditionally weren't your competitors suddenly are from a talent perspective on a location stance. So I think that the importance of this sort of data is never been more important. It's going to get more important as the pickup we're starting to see in the market is felt more aggressively. The C-suite's going to ask more and more and more from us. I think the moment is there. It's whether we take that opportunity. And I talked earlier about seeing opportunities and just taking it and going for it. I think that moment is there. I think we need to get used to breaking out of silos and doing work that might not impact our goals. It might not impact our KPIs. But do you know what? If it needs to be done, if we don't do it, another function will. And suddenly everything that you're seeing within talent intelligence is not owned by talent intelligence. It's owned by workforce planning or talent strategy or the economist functions or the risk functions, etc. So I think the opportunity is there. I just want us to take it. But that's a long way of getting around to your point of saying, what do I want out of it? I want us to be involved. You know, everyone talks about the seat at the table, and I hate that phrase, but I just want us to be involved and be known. You know, we need to be known as a function that understands the context of the data, one that's bringing value to the organization, and understands the commercial implications of what we're trying to do.
It's the recognition, isn't it, that's linked to it. And then last question, which I then might end with another question, which is a bit weird, but it kind of doesn't count. The last kind of proper question is, you've been running the Talent Intelligence Collective. So for those people who are listening to this who don't know it, there's a Facebook group, there's a WhatsApp group, there's a LinkedIn group, and the podcast for some time now. Why do you do it? You don't get anything out of it. So why do you do it?
I get loads out of it. It's purely selfish. It's purely selfish means. So it started because essentially when I started the Philips function, I wanted to benchmark. I wanted to see who else was doing this stuff. So I knew what good looked like. I knew what the North Star was. And I started tying in with some folks and having regular calls. So we had quarterly calls. So people like Ian Bailey and Hi Harari, etc. And they were awesome calls, really awesome calls. I am fundamentally terrible at arranging them. I'm fundamentally terrible at actually having a regular cadence and agenda and everything else. So, and they started to scale, and I said, look, this just isn't feasible. I'm not running this very well. So let's create an online group. So we started an online group so that we could start talking through there and driving things through there. For me, I love it to see teams starting to grow from nothing, and people that start off on there saying, you know, I'm starting a team from scratch. Has anyone got any words of wisdom, any advice, any etc.? And then you just start to see the teams growing, and you start to see them doing some really amazing stuff. And I'm learning on there all the time. You know, people are coming on there with new problems, new solutions, new products. I think it's a fascinating group, but I think it's for me, I hope it just keeps going. And you know, we've had some amazing support from people such as yourself. I think that there's a huge opportunity to build a true community within it. I don't think it needs to be something that's just one facet. I think it can be multifaceted, and I think there's a proper community that we can build within the TI world.
Yeah, I agree. And every day's a school day, and I learn something every time I have a conversation with anyone in that group. And then the last question that's not a question is, the purpose of this is to kind of show people who Toby is, and to make you more approachable than you seem on paper. I think you've done a cracking job of doing that through this interview. But if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it? Is it through the collective?
I'm very open, so wherever people find me, the collective is great. Through the collective, you can do the WhatsApp group, so you can WhatsApp me as well. If you want to grab me through LinkedIn, that's fine. My email address is out there as well, so you can grab me through direct on the email as well. So I'm very open. Obviously, collective is always good. So yeah, feel free to jump over onto Facebook and join the fun.
What a star! You have been, I knew this was going to be awesome, because you just are awesome, and it's not supposed to be an amazing Toby. You just genuinely are a nice guy, and what I hope people get from hearing this is that is true. So, you know, fire in the background, thank you for being so fabulous. And then for those who don't know, we're going to run Fireside Chats once every 2 months with different leaders, and there'll be this format. It's exactly get to know the people who are behind the pieces of paper, and hope you've learned something. Thank you very much, everybody.